Councillor McCreary, we are now live.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, councillors. Good morning, Mayor Bailey, staff, and folks who may be watching at home. This is today's edition of the Social Services Committee. Clerk, you have the roll call already?
Yes, I do.
Does any member of the committee have a declaration to make regarding a conflict of interest on any matter before us today? I see none. Chris, I wonder if you might read the rules of engagement and disclaimer before we get started here.
Certainly. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on as they count towards quorum. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members of the committee. Any member of the committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand function on the participant list screen, which is on the bottom right-hand side. Clerk staff will lower the hand when you have been recognized by the chair. And finally, in the event of a connection/service interruption, which affects quorum, we may recess for the meeting up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum isn't achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. And Councillor McCreary, those are your rules.
Mr. Clerk, thank you very much. Do I understand correctly that we have a delegation this morning?
Yes, we do.
Is he ready to go?
Yes, he is.
Mr. Phelp, are you here? Good morning, sir. You've been here a number of times, so you appreciate the fact that you have 10 minutes inclusive of questions to make your presentation.
Yes, Councillor, thank you very much. My name is Tim Phelp. I'm the Executive Director of Rosewood House. We were the operator of the winter warmth shelter that we ran last winter. And I'm sure that most of you have read the report that I've put on or that I sent out to council. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things from that report. So I should be fairly brief and I'd be happy to take any questions. First of all, I'd like to pay a tribute to staff. There was a great deal of work that had to go on to make this happen in the time frame that it did. And the cooperation and the work that was done was outstanding and first class. And I want to particularly highlight Anthony Labatt and Mary Musson, both of whom I worked with quite closely during this shelter run. And they made this work a lot better than it certainly could have. So there are a few lessons that we learned, and I just wanted to highlight some of them. I know that you've got a different suggestion on your agenda today for a winter warmth shelter or for dealing with this problem this year, but I just want to highlight some of the things that we learned last time. First of all, it was designed as a non-traditional shelter. There are many people who are resistant to coming to the traditional shelters because there are rules, there's a lot of structure in place, and it makes it very difficult for some people. And we had a very difficult time starting up because there were many people just did not trust the new shelter. A lot of people visited for a short time, had a quick coffee, and then left. And then after a few days, they started coming in. And so I think it takes a little bit of time for this sort of thing to work. And this is a difficult population to reach, because most of the people that use this shelter are not the traditional shelter users. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight was that this actually started we actually discovered almost a completely new population of homeless. Now at Rosewood, we've been dealing with the homeless population in one form or another for probably about 15 years now. And there were people in the winter warmth shelter that we'd never seen before. And people with extremely complex needs, mental health, drug addictions, antisocial behaviors. Some of these were people that we had never seen before. And it created a great deal of difficulty for us to try and sort how to work with this new population. I think in the end that we were mostly successful, but there are going to be groups of people that you will never get into any kind of a shelter system. The shelter location was a good location in that it was held downtown in the downtown area. And I think if you're going to have some kind of a shelter, it does need to be in that area because that's where the population is. Unfortunately, the structure that we had to use, the old police station in Brantford, It was a rabbit warren of rooms. It created all kinds of operational issues. If you're going to do something like this again, I'd recommend that it be in a large open space, such as an arena or auditorium someplace where everybody can keep an eye on things. That was probably some of our most difficult problems, keeping an eye on some of the actions that went on at the shelter. We ended up putting a lot of video cameras into the shelter, which helped tremendously. The city also tried to engage some of the volunteer community, and particularly the faith groups. And while I think that this was a laudable idea, it actually created a lot of problems, because while some volunteers were very helpful, others created a lot of problems. They're not used to working with this population. Sometimes there were extreme boundary issues, and there were also instances where shelter workers and or volunteers were put in danger because of the action of some of the volunteers that we had. So while I think a volunteer component could be part of it, I urge caution, because there are some very difficult issues that you can get into. The other difficulty we had was drug use. And while the primary purpose of the shelter was to keep people safe and warm over the winter, probably one of the biggest issues that we had to deal with was drug use. And while we tried to keep drugs off the property by instituting searches and things, it really didn't work. People smuggled, and without doing strip searches and other things which are not acceptable, there's no way to keep the drugs out of the shelter. I mean, frankly, they can't keep it out of prison, so how could we have a chance? So we probably had ambulance down there at least once every 3 or 4 days because of drug issues. And it's a far more serious issue than, I mean, I'm aware the drug problem is very serious, but it was far more endemic in this population. And there were several instances where people could have died if my staff had not been on hand to intervene. We also used the services of a security company. It was my experience that the people who get jobs in security companies, you have this image of a security company providing professional people to work with. That's not true. We ended up getting people that were not very good. And if we were to do this again, I would far recommend hiring more staff rather than the security company, and it would certainly be a lot cheaper. Basically, I think that the program was generally a great success. I'm also aware it was very expensive, but I think we saved some lives last winter. And again, I'd like to thank staff for all of the work, and I'd like to thank both councils for supporting this project financially. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Tim, thank you very much for that thorough presentation and yet mercifully brief. Do any members of council have a question? I don't see any hands raised. Councillor Wall, then Councillor Antosky. We have 3 minutes to go, guys. Councillor Wall, you're up first.
Quickly, Tim, could you just comment on interactions with your neighbors, specifically neighbors like right beside you, but also the impact on that part of Eagle Place?
Well, there were two things I think I need to point out. One of the comments I heard quite often was that a lot of the homeless people that were hanging around downtown were no longer there, but they were indeed around the shelter, and they did indeed cause great problems for the mosque, which was our next door neighbor. I met with them several times. We tried very hard to control the problem, but once people are outside the shelter, they're basically uncontrollable and they do what they want. Anytime you put a shelter together, you're going to concentrate the people, and you're going to have problems with the neighborhood. I mean, I live in Eagle Place, not far from where the shelter was, and I didn't see any problems in my neighborhood, but I know that there were reports that there were from other areas. So that's sort of a fact of life, which is one of the reasons that I recommended in my report putting it someplace like the auditorium of the Civic Center.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Antosky, you've got a couple of minutes left.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is more appropriate for staff when we're talking about the item.
Fair enough. Well, thank you then, Mr. Phelp, for your presentation this morning, and we'll see you. You're welcome to continue, but you won't be part of the panel.
Thank you.
Okay. I should mention, for the benefit of committee members who may not have checked their emails this morning, that There is a notice of motion that arose during our pre-meeting meeting yesterday, and I'm planning on advancing that as a resolution this morning. And it addresses what Councillor Wall just sort of commented on, as well as a story that was in the newspaper not too long ago. So let me start off by asking if we could have a mover and seconder for all the items that are before us today. I've got Councillor Wall, I've got Councillor Antosky as mover and seconder. Thank you very much. Of course, the item regarding the shelter is going to be separated because we had a delegation, and I would suggest that we probably separate the other item as well, because I think there will be some discussion on it. Does anybody want to separate consent or minutes? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote on those then. Chris, when you're ready. Are we voting by hand or are we voting electronically, Chris?
Through the chair, we're voting by hand.
Okay, so I'll call the question now on, I guess, what are the consent items before us? Those in favor, raise your hands manually. Thank you, that's unanimous. Now we're going to start off with item 4.2, temporary winter emergency shelter, as we had a delegation on that. Are there any discussion on that, folks? I see we have Councillor Weaver. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Just a reminder that committee members have 4 minutes times 2 for speaking opportunities. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Councillor.
So with this scenario 4.2, using hotels and motels, what kind of supports are there going to be, if any?
Good morning, Susan Evenden, Director of Social Assistance and Homelessness. So we do have quite a bit of experience in, having individuals in motels for various reasons. As this committee would be aware, we have moved away largely from the use of motels. And what's before you, the recommendation is that it would be one night at a time during a cold alert. So it very well could just be one overnight stay that's approved. But if it were to go on longer, if it were, say, a cold snap, then we do have housing resource staff that do connect with people that are in motels on a daily basis.
And when we have this scenario, how do we deal with, unfortunately, there was some criminality that did evolve from the other shelter from last year. Is there a way that we can ensure that that type of behavior is dealt with sort of immediately, sort of to make sure people understand it's not appropriate?
So through the chair, the short answer is there are limited options available. I can tell you what we do certainly is, if there is an incident, it would involve a call to police. But if there are instances of things like criminal behavior, damages, unruly behavior, then there's absolutely a discussion that occurs with the individual, and it could lead to a service restriction under our service restriction policy.
So when these folks are coming into the motel hotel scenario, do we explain that to them about, so they're just fully aware, we're very transparent, these behaviors will be negatively looked at and it may cost you your warm place to stay, just so they're aware, because I want to give everybody an opportunity to have a safe place to sleep, but we also need to deal with some of these behaviors, unfortunately.
Through the chair, yes, staff will always review conditions with individuals before placing them in motels.
And in the event that there is somebody that is behaving poorly, that we'd identify as somebody that might not be someone that we can house, is there a system in place to make sure that is known throughout our systems, so the person doesn't just go someplace else?
Through the chair, yes, there is.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor, thank you. I have Councillor Antosky up next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. Following up on that same conversation, I've been very vocal about my concern with the housing at some of the motels and recognizing that our options are limited. So we're having the conversation with our clients, and I know that we're trying to we have put some processes in place for the operators of the motels, but is our social services staff having any kind of conversation with the operators of the motels that really allow a lot of this criminality to happen, and our expectations, or is there any recourse? Because I think that it's one thing to ask that of the clients, which I think we need to, but as long as the cookie jar is open, this is going to continue happening. So I think that we have to also look at addressing it from the provider side.
Through the chair, yes, we can take that back, and I think we may also talk to our colleagues in other departments. But it may be useful to have some of those conversations with operators so that they understand that we may not choose to use their facility, for example, if it appears that there is, some laxity around expectations. On the flip side, we also know that there are some motel operators that have gone so far as to, ask people to leave in the middle of the night based on their behavior.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I think it's one thing for an operator to have the general public coming and run it how they want, but when our taxpayers are paying the money for us to house people there, I would like to see us have some sort of agreement on both sides of that, not putting somebody out in the middle of the night, but also having expectations of behavior, not allowing that criminality within their facility. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say to staff, I thought this was a fantastic report. I really like the balance between long-term solutions versus short-term solutions. So kudos to you guys for doing such a good job. Two questions. First one, I'll ask them both at the same time, then I'll mute myself. First question, I was really surprised at how big an impact the Marlene place had on reducing the number of chronic homeless people. I thought that was fantastic. So my first question is do you think another Marlene type housing facility would be the way to go, or at least we should be looking at that long term where there's a complete wraparound? So that's my first question, given the impact that seemed to have on the chronic number of people that are homeless. And the second question, you talked about Niagara. They're doing pretty good at diverting people from the homeless shelters. Is there anything they're doing that we're not, that we should be looking at? So two questions, and I'll mute myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, through the chair, I feel that perhaps Kevin or Aaron would like to jump in on the Marlene Avenue question. The comment that I would make is that obviously staff spend a great deal of time surveying the environment, looking for, what's been proven as being useful. It's an extremely, incredibly complex issue, homelessness, as you all are aware. The number one thing we all know that has evidence behind it is exactly the Marlene Avenue model, which is affordable housing, but not just the housing, also the wraparound supports. That's really the only thing out there that has a proven track record of success. So the answer from my perspective would be yes, that would be a worthy investment.
Thank you, Sue. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, good morning. It's Kevin O'Hara, Acting Director of Housing Services. Thank you, Sue. Through the chair to Councillor, I will say that Marlene Avenue, we're happy with the success there. Obviously, we do have some challenges that are settling out in terms of the community impact there, not dissimilar to what was mentioned around the winter shelter. But in terms of another potential supportive housing location, that is something that I will be briefly mentioning when we get to the next report. There was a report that went July 14th to Virtual City Council for the City of Brantford, looking at options to support affordable housing development. We're bringing a report in response to that this morning. One of those options was to explore the potential for a supportive housing partnership in our community. So something where a supportive housing provider can come, that the city and perhaps the county can assist in terms of initial capital, that supportive housing provider might then help us address similar issues to what we're doing through the Marlene Avenue location. Marlene Avenue is a success in that it was a major investment by the province. help us through the Home for Good program, and speaks to what Sue was talking around in terms of the principle of housing first, to get people off of the streets into accommodation that is a tenancy, that where supports are there daily, and there are supports there every day of the week at that location. So we're looking at how we can manage that without a major cost impact to the city, because again, Marlene Avenue will operate largely independent of any costs to the city through the Home for Good program through the province. So we're looking at a similar model, but hopefully with a partner in the community that can help us to provide more supportive housing to the citizens that we all serve.
So thank you. We have Councillor Sless next.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just looking at the budget line. I guess this, I don't know whether it would be you, Sue, or Kevin, but it looks like over the next 2 years, it's about $74,800, the city's cost to do this. The total overall cost is $80,000. Am I to presume that the balance is county?
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
How did we come to that ratio?
Through the chair, we use the same cost sharing ratio that we use for all of the homelessness programs. And that cost share ratio right now is based on the Ontario Works proportion of caseload in the county.
And what is that ratio in percentages?
I will double check my math, but I believe it's 6.5%.
So it's 93.5 to 6.5?
Through the chair, I'm just going to double check that.
Okay. And I guess my second question is, I think that should be reviewed. I think when someone is looking for this type of help, they're not wandering around St. George. They'll come to a larger community. So I think the numbers would definitely be skewed. They're going to come where they know the services are. And so to me, that skews the numbers completely. Also, I'd just like to know what hotels we're talking about. Where are we going to buy these rooms?
Hey, through the chair, I'll ask Mary Musson to weigh in on that one.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Mary Musson, Manager of Social Assistance and Homelessness Services. So with regards to which motels and hotels we would be looking at, we are actually working with purchasing, and we are putting a call out to find out which hotels and motels within the city would be interested in participating in a venture with the city, so that we don't have one single source for motels or hotels. So we've already had quite a few motels indicate that they may be interested, and then we would actually come back to staff to look at which is the most appropriate location based on accessibility to public transportation and services that could meet the needs of the city.
Okay, and do we negotiate rates with these operators?
Through the chair, we would give them the set rate, and then it would be up to the hotel or motel operator to opt in or opt out of the cold alert.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I just want to confirm in regards to Councillor Sleth's earlier question, current cost share ratio is 6.5 county, 93.5 city.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Councillor Sless. Councillor Wall, you're next. Go ahead, please.
All right, thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the hotel motel stays, what's the deal with transportation to and from?
I'll let Mary answer that. I think the answer is it depends.
Yes, through the chair, it does depend. If a person is requiring transportation and they have unique needs, such as accessibility issues, then homelessness staff can look at supporting them through whatever meets their needs best, whether it's an accessible taxi. If they need public transportation, we would provide them with a bus ticket to and from the motel.
Is that cost included in the report anywhere?
Through the chair, that would not be an additional cost in the report. Those costs would be fairly minimal with the number of cold alerts and would be supported through the regular homelessness budget. We do have a budget line for client transportation and needs.
All right, so forgive my ignorance, but how does somebody know when there's a cold alert?
Through the chair, the cold alert is publicized widely, as we know, throughout the community. And at 220 Colburn Street, we always do post notices, as does the library and other places that folks would frequent. They would also be finding that out if they were calling for assistance, either during office hours at our service support center or through the Salvation Army after hours. That protocol would be implemented. So largely, people would know that it was cold and they would call for a shelter bed, and this protocol would be activated.
And then final question, if I may, thank you. So I was just rereading the report while people were talking. Sorry. These hotel beds are only for if there's a cold alert, yes?
Through the chair, that's correct.
So is that our current winter emergency shelter plan then? Or is there another report coming for a proposed location?
So through the chair, just to clarify on that point, this is the second aspect of our winter sheltering plan. In March of 2020, which we can all be forgiven for forgetting about because it was right around the start of the pandemic, there was an approved report which authorized us to increase the number of beds at Salvation Army and Rosewood by 10 each, therefore increasing our overall supply of shelter beds. We had done, if members will recall, we had done an analysis of surrounding communities and found that with the winter shelter open during those months, we were way out of proportion with the number of shelter beds that we were funding locally. And there was a desire to be in a consistent area with the surrounding areas so as to avoid becoming a magnet for people looking for available shelter beds. So we had established a ratio that is in line with the other communities surrounding, with our 70 permanent shelter beds plus an additional available 10 shelter beds in Salvation Army that they can activate outside of this cold alert. So we felt that we had, presented an option that was approved for a permanent solution rather than opening an ad hoc winter shelter as we did last year.
Awesome. That answers all of my questions. Thank you very much. I mean, as other counselors have mentioned, it's a great report, and I appreciate all the hard work you and staff are doing.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ferrier, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated Councillor Sless's comment about cost sharing. I hope he brings up the exact same idea when we talk about the paramedic services and share based on usage, et cetera, because I think that'd be great. He sits on paramedics as well, and the city uses more of the paramedic service than the county, but the county pays more of it, and then the county pays, we can work that out. I think maybe we need a bigger cost sharing discussion overall, possibly. My question, though, however, is to, I guess, Susan. And it's just to use my time to answer Councillor Miller's question about what Niagara is doing well, because I think it kind of got skipped in the other discussion. So I saw the link, but the link was to a general website for Niagara. I'm wondering if there are specific things that you would suggest we do that they do in their model. I know we've used Niagara before. When I was chair of the Brantford Roundtable on Poverty, we used Niagara for a lot of their pilot projects were really interesting and were things that we could maybe do here. On this specifically, what are some that staff would recommend we really look at or start exploring ourselves even as members of this committee? Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, we would also be happy to bring a report, with a little bit more fulsome information to a later cycle as well in terms of examining, existing models, best practices in terms of homelessness. I think that there are some things that we know of from Niagara and other areas that we certainly have already adopted. So there's a few things that successful models do. One is diversion, right? So prevention and diversion. So, I do think that we can look at better ways to intervene with people who are experiencing housing difficulties, maybe falling a little bit behind on rental payments or having some disputes with their landlords and neighbors, the kinds of things that cause people to lose their housing. Being able to get to people sooner before it's it's a situation that can't be salvaged. I think that there are some lessons from what Niagara and other areas are doing in that regard. But primarily, I think where you see some real impact on reducing homelessness numbers and shelter usage. And that's really, the thing that we're discussing here is the escalating pressures year after year on our emergency shelters. We know that emergency shelters are not a solution to homelessness. And so there are other efforts underway that Kevin spoke of, and I think that we'll speak of later, to really increase the supply, but also be mindful of not just providing places for people to live that are affordable, which is obviously very important, but for long-term individuals experiencing homelessness, those supports are really key. And that's often where there's difficulty accessing funding, is for the ongoing operating costs of things such as supported housing. So I think that Niagara has made a conscious decision to start investing, and they're not alone, there are other communities, to really start investing in those kinds of supports, recognizing that you just can't endlessly fund shelter beds.
Thank you. Do I have time for one more question, Chair McCreary?
You have 56 seconds.
Okay, well, maybe it's just a suggestion then, but I love the report. I love Tim's report as well. It came up during Councillor Weaver's question as well about police fatigue in Tim's report when dealing with some of the issues of this community. I'm wondering if I'm not sure who sits on the Brantford Police Services Board, but maybe there's some connection that can be made between the police, social services, and some of the shelter systems to talk about that police fatigue piece and get from the police's point of view, the policing point of view, what could be done to ameliorate some of that, to make it more effective for everybody involved. Good partnership.
Councillor, thank you. And may I suggest that you take a couple of minutes and phrase your question regarding the Niagara report in a way that you can introduce an amendment to ask staff for that in a second round of speaking today, if I might suggest. I have Councillor Antosky next for a second time. I guess I should ask if anybody that hasn't spoken yet would like to go in front of Councillor Antosky. Councillor Bell, Mayor Bailey. Okay, Councillor Antosky, you've got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a quick question as a follow-up to the transit or the transportation to the hotels. Is there bus availability to all of the hotels that are showing interest? I'm wondering specifically about the ones on Colburn Street, on East Colburn Street. Is there bus service out there?
To my knowledge, if there is no bus service to a motel, then we're sending people by taxi.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ferrier, did you wish to introduce an amendment?
Sure.
I have no other speakers.
No worries. Yeah, I guess just an amendment that maybe, let's say, by the December social services meeting, if that makes sense for staff, to have a report on models used by comparator municipalities such as Niagara in order to combat, maybe that's not the right word, but in order to address diversion and other best practices.
Excellent. Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Miller, thank you, sir. Is there any discussion on Councillor Ferrier's amendment? Okay, we're going to go to the vote on the amendment then. If you could just manually raise your hands. If manually raising your hands is not redundant. Thank you. Now back to the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on what's before us? Then we'll go ahead and vote on that again. If we could please raise our hands. And thank you, guys. So now we're on to item 4.1, which is options to maximize the use of various municipally owned lands. Is there discussion on this item? Councillor Weaver, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to say it's a great report, and I appreciate staff's work on this. It's a bit of a omnibus bill as far as there's lots of different things that we're working on, but we're definitely going in the right direction. So I appreciate all the effort of staff and this committee, because a lot of these ideas came from our previous discussions. So thank you.
Councillor, thank you. I think it's interesting to see that we're proceeding with maximizing the use of the two properties that we have, and we're also looking at some other city-owned properties within our boundaries. I don't really see, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Bell, go ahead, please. I didn't see your hand up. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in respect of the recommendation to take option 2, I just wondered whether there was not actually a fourth option, which was a combination of 2 and 3. I think 2 is really important just to get after things that are available right now. But just like if I go back to the last conversation, long-term planning is really important. So we shouldn't focus only on option 2 at the expense of thinking about it long-term. So I would encourage that we expand this recommendation to either an option 4, or we just combine option 2 and 3 and move forward on that basis.
Okay, Councillor Bell, thank you. What's before us is option 2. I guess if you wish to add option 3, that's you could certainly amend the resolution before us, and we could debate that item. I would ask you to hang on to that though until we've had everybody able the chance to speak. So I'll ask if there's anybody else that would like to weigh in on this. Okay, Councillor Bell, if you'd like to.
Yeah. So I would like to amend the second item, so recommendation B, to reflect that option 2 it would be selected, but that option 3 would be followed at the same time.
Fair enough, Councillor. And could I have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Weaver first. Any discussion on Councillor Bell's amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to the vote on the amendment. Raise your hands, please, those in favor. Any opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, folks. So now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any additional discussion on that? Then we'll go to the vote manually. Please raise your hands if you're in favor. And that appears to be unanimous as well. Okay, thank you very much. So now we're going to move on to resolutions. I'm going to ask the clerk if he would read the motion to waive the rules, which is moved by, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Weaver, you have to take the chair. My apologies for the waive the rules and the resolution.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCreary. So we would ask the Deputy Clerk to read the rules for the 2/3 vote.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, I do have it in front of me. I can read it.
Okay, please proceed.
Yeah. The screen has been shared. So it's moved by me, seconded by Councillor Antosky, that section 1511.5 of chapter 15 of the code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without notice. Item 6.1, affordable housing sites safety. Whereas the city of Brantford and county of Brantford are committed to increasing the supply of affordable and supportive housing units in accordance with the municipal master housing plan, and whereas the establishment and operation of affordable housing and emergency shelters must consider the safety, dignity, and quality of life for tenants, clients, and neighbors. And whereas enhancing security, social supports, and access to healthcare and affordable housing communities creates positive individual and neighborhood outcomes. And whereas proactive approaches to safety and well-being within and around affordable housing communities and emergency shelters can reduce crime, social disorder, and stigmatization. Now, therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to provide a report to Social Services Committee by December 2020 outlining the following. 1, best practices to ensure safety and quality of life within and around affordable housing sites and emergency shelters. 2, the feasibility of applying these approaches to City of Brantford housing and emergency sheltering locations. And 3, any costs associated with implementing these approaches. And if I might just speak to the waive the rules provision, Mr. Chair.
There's actually, we don't discuss waiving the rules. It's just a straight up vote for 2/3. And then once that's completed, we'll go back to you, Councillor McCreary, if it passes.
Fair enough, thank you.
So I'll call the votes now, and the vote is to waive the rules to allow this resolution to be heard today rather than giving notice. So if everyone could put their hand up, that's in favor. That appears to be unanimous, so that passes. And we'll go back to Councilor McCreary for his speaking opportunity.
So I'll introduce the resolution now, Mr. Chair.
You just need to read the title.
Correct. So it's moved by Councilor Antosky. Sorry, moved by me, seconded by Councilor Antosky. And the title eludes me. Somebody want to help me out here?
Could we put that back up on the screen for the
Affordable
clerks?
housing site safety.
Beauty. Thank you. So thank you, Mr. Chair, for looking after this for me. So we've had some circumstances lately which bear some attention. Members may recall that we've had some issues in one of the seniors buildings, which made the front page of the newspaper. We've also had a number of concerns expressed about some of the activities that have been conducted in and around our supportive housing sites, namely Rosewood and Marlene Avenue. So I think what we need to do is we need to have staff address the issues both inside and outside our housing units and begin to address a plan to care for the folks that live there, their safety and well-being, as well as the neighborhoods around some of the other items that we currently fund and operate. I don't want to be too graphic about some of the things that have happened, but I would hope that everybody would support this. And my apologies for the urgency of this. I think it's something we need to move on. And the mayor raised this actually with me yesterday that we should be having a look at this. And I think it's appropriate to do it today. And again, I apologize for laying this on everybody at, I guess not the 11th hour, but the 9th hour. So I'd appreciate everybody's support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. One speaker on the list, Councillor Ferrier, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I plan on completely supporting this. I'd only ask that, in addition, I understand that Brantford Police will be part of this likely because it's a big part of safety. But I'd ask that the county OPP as well be involved. We do have our 80 units of affordable housing. We also have some other rent geared to income housing that's not on the list that sees a spike in crime compared to other and disorder compared to other areas of the county. And if we're going to be building another 50 potential units, at the very least, I hope more, but 50 in the nearer term, that this is something that will, especially if it's going to be next to another 50 unit seniors home, that, you know, the county OPP could be involved in the best practices and also develop more capacity for dealing with more affordable housing neighborhood issues, so we could get ahead of this. So I just ask that that social services staff reach out to the county OPP and include them on some of this as well, and for them to also support the city police however they can in this.
Thank you, Councillor. So to Councillor McCreary, would it be friendly if we added at the beginning, the whereas does talk to the city and the county, but then the therefore, if we were to add where the city of Brantford is mentioned, also mention the county of Brant. Would that be friendly to Councillor McCreary and Councillor Antosky?
Absolutely.
Okay. I think that covers your concern, Councillor Ferrier. Is there any other speakers on this matter? Okay, just before we go to the vote, I'll just use my opportunity. Let me reset my clock. So one of the issues that was heard in the paper was about some housing apartment buildings that are in Ward 1, which is my ward in the city of Brantford. It has been a struggle. We've set up meetings with the police. We've set up meetings with city staff, housing staff, and there are some plans in place to try to assist some of these folks and address some of the issues that they're having. But I think this resolution will go a long way in helping those situations that we're seeing ourselves in. So I'm very appreciative of the resolution. I'm going to be happy to support it. So if I don't see any other speakers, so I will call the vote. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And with the resolution passed, I will pass the chair back over to Chair McCreary.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Weaver. Does anyone have a notice of motion to bring before us today? I see none. Does anyone have a question? Then I will thank you for your participation today, and thanks to those of you who were watching at home. We're now adjourned, and we're going to move on to our next meeting of the morning, which is, bear with me a second, Brantford Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board of Directors. So one's adjourned and the other is getting underway.
Councillor, I believe it's the Brantford Local Housing Corporation, which deals with both councils.
Oh gosh, you're absolutely right. Thank you, Councillor Weaver. So yeah, Brantford Local Housing Corporation. I'll presume the clerk has the roll call, as if no one has left. Any conflicts of interest, folks? Nope. We have no presentations, no delegations. May I get a mover and seconder for everything before us today? Councillor Laferriere, Councillor Weaver. Anything for separation? I see none. I'm going to call the vote on everything. I'm sorry?
Councillor Miller raised his hand.
Oh, there it is. Councillor Miller, go ahead, please. What would you like separated?
Well, I have a question on 5.1, but it's going to be dealt with through your notice of motion, which I didn't read, by the way, until about 5 minutes ago. But I'd still like to ask that question if I could on 5.
So 5.1. Okay. So go ahead, ask your question on 5.1.
Well, I guess through you, Mr. Chair, to Kevin. He's the author of the report. But I was going to ask about Lorne Towers and if he had any input beyond what was in what I've read in the newspaper about the safety of tenants at Lorne Towers. And I understand certain things have been done, as far as access to the building and stuff like that. But there was nothing in the report about that. I'm just wondering, you know what, Mr. Chair, I'll leave this whole issue alone for now, given that like I say, your motion earlier today. But yeah, I'll just share with you that I too was concerned about what I read, and I'm glad at least it's being addressed. So I'll leave it at that. And but I do look forward to the answer coming forward in a couple cycles. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. Anything else on this agenda item before us? Councillor Weaver, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair McCreary. I was just wondering if we could request staff, so specifically Kevin O'Hara. When that article came out, you had sent an email out with everything that we've done. I was wondering if we could share that with our county colleagues, just so they have an understanding of all the work that staff have been doing with this item.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to, Councillor, share that activity with the county councillors. And just to speak to it as well, we're reporting today on the first 2 quarters of the local housing corporation, and I believe that story was more recent and just in this 3rd quarter. So we'll be sure to address it as per the motion that has already been made and with our future reports, but we'll certainly share that information that we shared with the city councillors with the county councillors as well.
Thank you very much. That's all my questions, Councillor McCreary.
Councillor, thank you very much. Any other comments, guys? Okay, then we're going to go to the question on 5.1. Those in favor? And that carries. And we'll go to the question on 5.2. Any errors or omissions on the minutes? Let's vote. Those in favor? That carries. And does anyone have a resolution? Does anyone have a notice of motion? We are adjourned, and thank you, county folks. You're welcome to stay for the remainder if you like, but I think we'll be seeing you. Okay, so this one's over. We're moving on now to the next one, which would be the one that I tried to do before. That would be the Brantford Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation Board of Directors. And let's see now. Roll call has been taken. Any conflicts, guys? No delegations, no presentations. Can I get a mover for everything before us? Moved by Councillor Antosky, seconded by Councillor Sless. Anything for separation? Then we'll go to the question. Those in favor?
Councillor Antosky had a question.
Oh shoot! I keep forgetting to look at the blue hands. I'm sorry, Cheryl. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And sorry, I'm just trying to see the item. I'm just looking at my highlighted. I do have some questions on 5.1.
Go ahead.
Thank you. my first question is about the maintenance or the work orders. It shows that they were quite high in the beginning and quite a bit lower. I'm concerned, and you address this in the report a little bit, but with such a huge increase in the first part of the year, and then the lower increase because, or the lower amount of work orders because of COVID, are we expecting once we can deal with more of this, with COVID kind of being pushed aside a little bit, are we expecting to see that same kind of increase in work orders? Do we have any idea?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. I'll speak to that in that we are actually have resumed regular maintenance services, and that first spike in work orders, it was more related to those kinds of issues or emergency issues that aren't regular. There was some additional work that was required during that time period. I don't have the exact details of that, but it was a little unusual, but we had kept up with any urgent maintenance issues through the COVID pandemic. And we have, as I said, resumed our regular day-to-day work order. And we haven't really seen a huge backlog of work orders in the portfolios that we're managing for community housing services. So we're pretty confident, again, through the chair, Councillor Antosky, that things are well in hand and that the maintenance is being performed. There is a bit of a delay in the resumption of regular services just because of that slight backlog. For the municipal nonprofit portfolio, it wasn't that large, but we have a fixed number of staff that service both the nonprofit portfolio and the local housing corporation portfolio. And we try to do work orders that we can through existing services without contracting them out, of course, to save those sorts of resource expenditures. So I'm pretty confident that we're okay in terms of work orders, but we'll certainly look into that question a little bit more for you if you'd like.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, I have one more question and one more comment. The second question I have is on the Beckett building. It's indicating some 2020 capital needs, including things like windows. Is it common practice now that when we're doing, fix-ups or retrofits, that we are looking for more sustainable, more environmentally friendly products as we start changing things out? Is that a common practice that we just automatically look at, for instance, whatever, a triple pane window or something that's more efficient for operational costs?
Yes, through the chair. Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, we will look to more efficient windows, more efficient operating systems such as make-up air units or anything that has to do with the mechanical or energy consumption of the building. We are working toward reducing that greenhouse gas emission wherever possible and increasing efficiencies in insulation. Where it doesn't have a significant impact on budget, we will definitely use them. And if there is a significant impact, but it has a good savings, we would of course bring that back and get approval for that additional cost.
Thank you for that confirmation. And just one quick comment, if I may, Mr. Chair, on the Healthy Kids passport. I just want to clarify it mentions that the backpacks that went out to the kids had a small bag of potatoes in it. I want to clarify that yes, there were some seed potatoes, but it was an activity. They were given a bag and some instructions on how to grow their own potatoes in a bag from their location on their porch, or they just weren't given a bag of potatoes. So just some clarification there. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor, thank you. Last chance, guys. We'll go to the vote on 5-1. Those in favor? And that carries. Anything on 5-2? Errors or omissions? And we'll vote on the minutes. Those in favor? We have no resolutions before us. Does anybody have a notice of motion? Okay, then we're all done. Thank you, everybody, for participating today. Thanks to staff, and we'll see you around.